Focus. Development is the focus, natural development, of course. It's the aim of Montessori education. It's the center of Montessori education. And that means that education is a means to development. It is never an end unto itself. Is it okay, or is it too echoey? Oh, it's okay. All right. All right. And it's so easy to forget. But I'm going to repeat it. Education is the means to development and not an end unto itself. And in this connect, and that's very important for us in the second plane, because with the second plane, we actually come to those ages that constitute the first block of compulsory education, or what's compulsory education in this country. All right, and it's easy to lose track, even people who want to implement Montessori approach, it's easy to lose track. And I'm going to give you a quote from Dr. Montessori, who says, education should be viewed as an aid to life, which is in the process of development. Thus, it is that psychology assumes its true place as the foundation upon which education has to be built. If education is to be, in very truth, an aid to life. Okay, we're in the elementary years. You sure you're not hearing an echo? I'm hearing an echo. You're all right? Okay, so this is very important now, because we're in that first block of education, those years. She says, if education is to be, in very truth, an aid to life, it will no longer be the curriculum which is the center of education. The pivot upon which all turns will be the entire life of the psyche. Spontaneous work will take the place of the forced activity rendered obligatory by the curriculum. Okay? And that's taken from an article, would have been a lecture once upon a time, but now it's an article, Principles and Practice in Education. An article is really worth reading. Right. So, I'm going to continue quoting Montessori then. For the second plane, in a minute I'll continue quoting Montessori. For the second plane of development, years 6 to 12, okay, which I said now constitutes that first block of compulsory education. What is it that we try to do in traditional education? We try to offer a certain amount of knowledge to the children. And what becomes important is that knowledge that's being offered. And as Montessori says over and over again, what we expect back is exactly what we gain. Okay? It's pretty limiting and restricting. Now, she uses the expression culture, but when Montessori uses culture in a context like this, she's talking about human knowledge. The way you say someone is a cultured person, you mean they're knowledgeable as well as perhaps courteous and so on. But anyway, so just know that culture is a word that has many meanings, you know. But when she talks about it in the context of education, she always means human knowledge and understanding, or at any rate, human knowledge. So she says this as well. The acquisition of culture is not thus being restricted. So not putting the curriculum at the center doesn't mean that we're restricting culture. The acquisition of culture is not thus being restricted, but it has to take place in harmony with psychic characteristics. Nor is the program vetoed. On the contrary, it is desirable that there should be one. Only it should derive from experience. Experience which shows the average level to which children attain when the instruction they receive is suited to their natural activities. And provided this is so, I see no reason why the curriculum should not be even ampler, that's to say even wider, and more interesting than it is today. The existing programs would bear enriching rather than pruning. The kind of program I contemplate would stand for guidance, not coercion, and could do no harm at all. The danger is when the curriculum is forcibly imposed. Right? So that's really important. It's particularly important for 6 to 12 people who have to constantly deal with pressure from the schools, pressure from the parents, and all the rest of it. But the truth is, if we impose a curriculum on the children, and we start to say, this is what you have to do this week, this is what we're going to do next week, you're not going to liberate those energies that come from deep interest that has to do with the nature of that plane. If we allow the natural energies to be liberated, right, the children will do far more than what's actually required by a limited curriculum. But we get so what? So scared or something, you know, that we start putting the curriculum at the centre rather than development, rather than the individual human person. Anyway, so my comment, in Dr. Montessori's experience, when the children's psychological characteristics were respected, they manifested eagerness to work and enthusiasm in the study of subjects, such as mathematics. All right? And now I'm going to quote Montessori. What was really wonderful was to see the great spiritual happiness. So we're back to happiness. It's a symptom of healthy development. To see the great spiritual happiness of the children in their amazing enthusiasm. Their spiritual happiness, their amazing enthusiasm, their persistence. See, that's another great quality, is this ability to persist, right? Not give up too easily. Their persistence with self-imposed difficult problems, and their great joy whenever they arrived at a solution that was often reached through channels unheard of by the teacher herself. This is taken from what would have been a talk, but is now an article called Psychogeometry and Psychoarithmetic, and it was published in AMI Communications in 1982, and it was issue number 1/2. Okay, right. Oh, that was interesting. Right. So we have to be guided by what we've understood in our courses and so on, even when we're implementing the approach in practice, in the environment. You know, I know this is difficult, but it means, I mean, the Montessori trained teachers know, but the administrators and heads of school of those Montessori schools also have to know that all work in harmony for the benefit of the children, including those second plane children. All right, now, as I said before break, the second plane of development has a corresponding second plane of education, and the Montessoris came to call that plane of education cosmic education. Right? And of course, it's going to contrast with the first plane. It's almost as though there's a rebirth that takes place now. I can't say birth, let's say a rebirth of an individual who shows different characteristics, has different interests, different developmental needs, etc., etc. Okay. Now, what's amazing is that it took Dr. Montessori decades to reach cosmic education. Decades. I said earlier, Montessori starts the work with typical children in 1907, right? And she actually publishes this book, which in English was known as the Montessori Method, in 1909, right? Just 2 years. But it was because she had friends who wanted all those experiences to be put down in print and not lost. So she does set it down in the form of a book, okay? And she points out that actually what's gone into the book, the original Montessori method, is not just the 2 years of Children's House, but it's also the years before when she worked with those atypical children, and even the years before of her two predecessors that she always acknowledges, Sagan, a trained doctor, and Sagan's teacher, Dr. Attard, I-T-A-R-D, another French doctor. Attard was a doctor for deaf mutes, and he advised Sagan to actually focus on special needs children, which they used the different terms back then. But anyway, that was his advice to Sagan, and Sagan followed it. Okay, so she acknowledged, anyway, 1909, out comes Montessori method. Then in 1916, she publishes what in English is known as the Advanced Montessori Method. Right, it's not her title. This is a title, again, that the publishers of the English edition decide upon. Her title in Italian is much longer and more. In Italian, it's always known as l'autoeducazione. So l'autoeducazione translates as self-education, educating oneself. The title in English is the Advanced Method. It's a completely different ring about those two different titles. Anyway, it comes out in 1916. That's only 7 years. And what you see in the Advanced Method, which by the way in Italian is published as a single volume, and in English is published as in 2 volumes, I have to say, if you look well at volume 2, you see how many advanced, what she's calling advanced materials, are already devised, already prepared, all right, already available to these older children. It's just a few years. So that's pretty amazing. But when you look again, what is it that's actually being offered to those children back in 1916? Marvelous as the materials are, which are devised for elementary education. What are the subject areas? Language, arithmetic, geometry, which together we consider to be mathematics, music, and drawing. Right? That's it. It's as though she's working on subject areas that would have been offered in traditional schools, right? And she wants to help these older children to learn whatever is being offered in traditional schools, but to learn in a way that helps development, which always means the children being active rather than the teacher always being active. How can the children be active? They have to work with their hands. Right? So they need materials. They work with what Montessori